when a brilliant scientist from behind the Iron Curtain, in an assassination attempt, develops a blood clot on the brain that is going to kill him. The scientist Benz is utilizing technology developed that can miniaturize matter. So a team of scientists and experts in a submarine enter into his bloodstream in order to save him. The film starred Stephen Boyd, Edmund O'Brien, the great Donald Pleasant, Doncaster, I kept saying all the way through, Arthur Kennedy, and it was the first big screen appearance for an actress who made a sizable impression. Yes, Rachel Welch. This, as a kid, was a film that my dad showed me, and back in the day, I would wait until whichever channel would show it again so I could fall in love with this film all over again. Who couldn't love a film about a submarine and a crew shrunk to microscopic size and venture into a body to repair a damage to the patient's brain? That film is so me. And I sat down and I passed this on to the kiddo. And I thought I made a great mistake, because it does take its time to get going. But once you enter into the body and into the void, this film is still a roller coaster ride. Over to you.
Yeah, it's a film that, I mean, lots of films of that era have that slow build up before it actually gets to the core of the story. But once they get injected into the body, it then becomes a wonderfully visual spectacle of a film. And you really start to really believe in this journey that they're taking through the human body. It's helped by the fact that the director had studied medicine and anatomy before he made his move to filmmaking. So he wanted to represent the inner workings of the body as close to believable, but giving them that sci-fi sheen of majestic wonderment. And he even had medical experts working on it to make sure that things kind of make sense, that if they're going from one passage to another, that would track. But overall, for me, I watched this like you at an early age. It was my mum who first put this on for me. And I used to keep a lookout for it coming back on TV again so I could watch it again. And when we got our first VHS player, this was one of the first films that I recorded so I could watch it whenever I could. It's just so visually beautiful. It's visually, even the outside the body elements, is everything that I love about this era of sci-fi, where you've got great big data banks with flashing lights and spinning tapes, but it's all symmetrical. Every room is kind of symmetrical, and the symmetry and the color palettes, all the cabinets are gray, but there's occasional streaks of yellow or browns. It all looks absolutely crisp, absolutely sexy. And this is the kind of future that I dreamed of living in. This future world. I'm disappointed that my world does not look like this.
It's got a great look. You're absolutely right. One of the things that blew me away watching it again, and it's been many years since I've seen Fantastic Voyage, and that was the scale of the film, the scale of the design, the sets, the huge sets, and very clever that they're all intertwined to a degree that you can carry on with one camera shot from one location to the other location. I'm thinking about the environment where the control center is. It's got that fantastic 60s view of what the futuristic was all about, and exactly like you, that is the future that I wanted to live with. It's a film that was incredibly well received for its special effects. It had 5 nominations at the 39th Academy Awards, mostly in technical departments, and it did win for Best Visual Effects and Best Direction in Color. Now, there's an award that's now out the window, but it still holds up. Yes, the effects now are a little shaky, but this is a film that's nearly 60 years old. But the story and the idea behind it are absolutely fascinating. The submarine the Proteus, which is miniaturized to about the size of a microbe, is injected into the scientist's body. The design of the submarine is fantastic, an icon, and I don't think I had, but I would have loved a model version of it in my room, and that would have been absolutely perfect. It's got a great cast. It's got a cast where, okay, now some of it seems a little bit obvious. Raquel Welch's character is in one shot. She's the only character who dons her scuba diving gear to camera, which I thought was a little bit lame. But apart from that, everything holds up remarkably well. There are some scenes and set designs which are absolutely still jaw-dropping.
Yeah. And it's also interesting as well with the music used in this film, because Leonard Rosenman did a score for it, but he did no music for the first 4 reels. The music only kicks in once they're injected into the human body. And that's when it becomes part of the magic of the traversing through bloodstreams and, ear canals, etc. That scene in the ear canal is so tense. I remember as a kid watching that and just you're holding your breath because they have to do some repairs to the submarine craft. Basically, they've got clogged up engines and they have to go outside the vessel while they're in the ear canal. And then it cuts outside to the control room where they say it needs to be utter silence within there because even the slightest sound could destroy them while they're in the ear canal. And you don't want to breathe yourself because you're worried that you're going to cause them to have something go wrong. And it's just such tense stuff without any real major threats. The threat is the human body itself trying to fight off anything that shouldn't be there. And obviously the submarine has to be careful not to alert the human body that it's infiltrating the bloodstream. It has got an underlying threat of there may be a traitor in the mist, which does play through quite well, even though it's pretty obvious who the traitor's going to be.
Yeah, and he's not really a traitor, is he?
No,
he's slightly misunderstood. It's not revealed that he works for the other side. It's more to do with fear. That was my take.
It's his own paranoia, his own. It is at the start of the whole thing. He panics and almost tries to flee and almost destroys it because he suffers from elements of claustrophobia. But yeah, it just plays out as an imaginative and creative sci-fi venture into the human body. And I just love everything about this film. Rewatching it this week in crisp, beautiful glory was such an eye-opener for me because this is one of those films that I've always had at the back of my mind and thought, maybe now that I'm a little older, this is not going to hold up. But I'm glad to say that it did. Even the effects work. I think, they look dated, but it's still... because you're inside the human body and none of us have shrunk down that size to be inside the human body, you accept it. You accept that that's how it looks. You're caught up by this strange cell-like structure wall of the ear canal that has little symbols on each thing. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I like to think that it actually does. I like to think that that's what the inside of my body looks like. Great film. If you've never seen Fantastic Voyage, I can't recommend it enough. Now, I know that most people will have seen a film that was heavily inspired by Fantastic Voyage, which
You're talking about Inner Space, aren't you?
Yes. The Martin Short comedy with Dennis Quaid, Inner Space, which had apparently elements that were drawn from a proposed potential sequel that Asimov was writing for the novelizations of Fantastic Voyage, which would have seen like East and West both being injected into the same body and trying to fight for control of one person's body. And Inner Space kind of does that towards the last act of the film. Inner Space is another great example of being creative and adventurous. I don't think it's anywhere near as good as Fantastic Voyage, but it's an utter joy to watch because of the comedy performance from Martin Short and the more seriousness of Dennis Quaid's character as the pilot who's stuck within the body of an unassuming guy who gets injected rather than a rabbit. And it's Joe Dante as director on Inner Space that makes it feel fresh, imaginative, and doesn't feel like it's just a carbon copy of Fantastic Voyage. But Fantastic Voyage itself, it's such a great 60s era sci-fi film that is, I think it's one of the best of that era. And there were some great films of the 60s.
I've got to agree. I think a lot of that is down to Richard Fleischer, who brought us the brilliant, still one of the most visually imaginative films of all time, is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea for Disney. And he brings verisimilitude to the film. It makes the film, no matter how preposterous the idea of miniaturization is, he makes the film feel real. Now, at one point, and I didn't know, this was an interesting fact, it was positioned as one of as a sequel in the Derek Flint spy movie series, which stars James Coburn, and I love the Flint movies, but I'm so glad that they went in their own direction on this one. There have been talks for many years at one point of a sequel, as Andy mentioned. Been talking of a remake with James Cameron connected to it for an awful long time. He's interested in directing the film. He's been interested since 1997, and we mentioned on this show that it's still something he wants to do. He left it behind to go and focus on Avatar. Roland Emmerich at one point was connected to do it. Thank goodness that never happened. Paul Greengrass, even Sean Levy have all intended to make a version of Fantastic Voyage. Eventually, you know what? There will be. But in the meantime, I insist, get small. Check out this film because it is marvelous. Let's go back to 1975, shall we? To the Rocky Horror Picture Show, based on the hit stage musical, The Rocky Horror Show. One of the most beloved of musicals. In fact, when we did our list of musicals that you love, everyone, bar none, mentioned the Rocky Horror Picture Show. The film starred the great Tim Curry, Richard O'Brien, who'd written the stage script, Susan Sarandon, Barry Bostwick, Little Nell, Meatloaf. We could just go on. It is one of those films that once seen is never forgotten. The plot, well, who cares? It's a pastiche of 1950s science fiction movies following a flat tire, Brad and Janet, two all-American kids, stranded on a dark, stormy night, experience strange incidents when they seek shelter in a nearby castle, which belongs to the transvestite Frank and Furter, an eccentric and crazed scientist. That's all you need to know about the plot, because it just basically pastiches every science fiction film you've seen. A monster created in a lab, a scientist, a narrator. This film's got it all. And when I say it's got it all due to mainly an awesome, outstanding performance by Tim Curry that defined his career to this day. Andy, there's no point asking you how much you love the film, because like me, you're giddy with anticipation to talk about it.
Oh, I adore this film. I think I watched this at far too early an age. It was my sister who introduced me to this one, my elder sister. And it's one of those films that I kind of knew that maybe I was a bit too young for some of the aspects of it. But boy, it was an awakening for me for what musicals can be. Because up until that point, the musicals that I kind of seen were your Greasers or your My Fair Ladies or your classic ones. But this showed that, you know what, you can make anything into a musical and make it superb, make it funny, and make it bizarre. When I watched this, I already had a love for B-movies, which certainly helped, like at an early age, latching onto what it was riffing on. Because BBC Two used to always show, like, it was usually on a Tuesday or Thursday at 6 o'clock. There was some classic B movie slammed in there to watch. And so watching this, I kind of got the hammy acting that it was going for, because it was representing that era of filmmaking. I mean, even the title song, Science Fiction Double Feature, is referencing all,
It's a list.
your
It's a list
classic.
song, isn't it?
Yeah. But even on that very first watch, we kind of knew Time Warp, like at that point, because everyone knows Time Warp. But it was when Frankenfurter descends in that lift with that fabulous cape on. And then when he throws it off halfway through his sweet transvestite song and starts strutting around in a full basque and stockings. And the young me had a little bit of an awakening at that point.
In fact, you are doing this week's show in stockings. I mean, let's let it be known.
Don't dream it, be it. At that point of the film, the young me suddenly felt a bit weird about his own sexuality. And I think that was the moment that I kind of realised that I'm bisexual at a very early age, because Tim Curry is fabulously magnificent. Oh man, the most gorgeous man to ever grace the planet, as far as I'm concerned. And it all comes from this film. I'm known to break out into song quite frequently from Rocky Horror, particularly that whole "I'm just a sweet transvestite," and I do it. There's other interpretations of it. I mean, we've had a modern version of it done for Sky Movies, and there's been stage productions, but no one delivers it the same way that Tim Curry did, and that's how I have to deliver it. So I was like, "How do you do? I see you've met my faithful handyman." I adore Frankenfurter, and I adore the film that hangs around him throughout this whole enjoyable 100 minutes from start to finish. And I say to finish because I sit through all the end credits every time I rewatch this, because you have to. You have to embrace it completely.
This is a film, as I said, it started out as a stage show written by Richard O'Brien, music, book, and lyrics, and which started in 1973 and proved to be hugely successful. And most of the Royal Court Theatre cast went on to be in the film, including Nell Campbell and Patricia Quinn. However, the film didn't set the box office alight. In fact, it was considered to be a bit of a disappointment, even though for horror fans, it was made at Bray Studios, the home of Hammer. It included a lot of the props and sets from a lot of Hammer films, so it had that authenticity to it. It introduced us to glam rock, to a glam rock musical, and I think I can go as far to say that some of the stylings went on to influence punk, but it didn't find an audience at the cinema. Where it did find an audience was in the midnight shows. The midnight shows basically is where the film became a hit. Audience members would participate with the film, and it began in New York back in 1976, and members returned to the cinema frequently, talked to the screen, and began dressing as characters, performing alongside the film, lip syncing to the song, adding in their own props, the water pistols, and the show became. Yeah, the toast.
Raise a toast, throwing toast in the air. Interactive performances of this, either on stage or at cinemas. I mean, every cinema that I've worked in, when there's been a screening of this, we just have to accept that some people are taking umbrellas in, some people will have water pistols, some people have toast, people will dress up, people get involved, they shout out responses to the screen, they have fun with it, and that's what the cult following of this has generated. The midnight showings that made it the success that it became, because after flopping at the box office, it's now, on last reported figures, it's 170 million approximately it's taken on a 1.4 million budget because of those cult following screenings. But the interactivity is part of the charm of it. If you go to a screening of Rocky Horror Picture Show, just expect an audience who are being rowdy, because that's what the film is. The film encourages it.
Don't expect to go in and have your normal cinema etiquette. Everybody should upturn your phones off. It's not going to happen with the Rocky Horror Picture Show. And why not? It's an absolute party. It breathed new life into the film. The film, because of that, is still around to this day. Somewhere and especially in the build-up to Halloween, the Rocky Horror Picture Show can be viewed. The stage show tours almost every year, and if you get a chance, even though it's not the same, and it's very hard to have somebody come in and do what Tim Curry did, but you can participate. People dressed up. I've done it. You've done it, Andy. It is one of those movies that transcends being a film, transcends being a musical to become an experience. And people just don't like this film. People just don't like this film. People love it, adore it, and eat it up. Let's talk a little bit about Tim Curry, because he'd done well on the stage, but this film introduced him to the big screen. And because of this film, he's had an incredible career.
Yeah, it basically launched him into, even though it underperformed on its initial release, he became really prominent in all the front running of any promotional materials and any screenings. He was always the person who people remembered the most. And yeah, his career, catapulted from that point onwards to films such as Clue, Stephen King's It miniseries, which everyone has a lot of love for what he did with there. He scared me at that point, but I still found him quite arousing. But he's just embodies the fun of the whole production of Rocky Horror. It's all hanging around him, but that's not to say that the rest of the cast are weak. Right from the opening, with the narrator played by
Charles Gray.
Yeah, played by the great Charles Gray, who even he gets in. He's all very stoic and just seriously regaling this story of Brad and Janet. But once he gets to the time warp scene, even he's getting involved with it, jumping up on the desk and jumping to the left and stepping to the right. And that's the point of the film where you just go, you embrace this. It's fun. Its music is catchy, brilliantly composed, brilliantly realized and written. But the film around the music is hilariously funny at the same time. Some of the best exchanges of dialogue ever put on film are within this one. I mean, one which always makes me chuckle, and again, it's thanks to how Tim Curry delivers it, is that when Brad asks him, "What have you done with Janet?" He's like, "Nothing. Why? Do you think I should?" And it's how he delivers it. Everyone else around him is great, but Tim Curry is majestic throughout this.
So you'd think for a film that underperformed at the box office, would it have a sequel? Well, yeah, kinda. It did. O'Brien drafted a sequel titled Rocky Horror Shows His High Heels in 1979. The script featured the return of all the characters from the original movie, and O'Brien wished to reunite the original production team. The director, Jim Sharman, though, didn't wish to revisit the original concept so directly. And sadly, neither did Tim Curry wish to reprise the role. So Sharman reunited with O'Brien to film Shock Treatment in 1981. This is a kind of a sequel. There are recognizable aspects. It's Brad and Janet, but it's not Susan Sarandon and Barry Bostwick this time. It has little continuity from the original movie. As it initially conceived and scripted as the Brad and Janet show, the film repurposed several songs from the earlier Rocky Horror shows, from Rocky Horror Shows His Heels project, with lyrical adjustments and depicting the characters' continuing adventures in the town of Denton.
Yeah, I've caught clips of Shock Treatment. I've never watched the whole thing because everyone who I know who's a fan of the Rocky Horror Picture Show who has seen it has advised me to not watch it because it just pales significantly in comparison. It feels like a mess of ideas because he had to cobble the ideas that he wanted for his actual sequel and had to engineer something out of that. Apparently it just doesn't come together as well. It doesn't have the same fun. It doesn't have the same spirit or energy. And I know that O'Brien has continuously looked at the possibility of a Rocky Horror Picture Show sequel even since. Back in 1991, he was working on the idea of Revenge of the Old Queen, but that got scrapped after studio head Joe Roth was kicked out of Fox in 1993, and it's been shelved indefinitely. And then in the early part of this century, he was working again on a third attempted sequel project with Rocky Horror: The Second Coming, but nothing ever came of that. That was intended as a stage production, integrating again elements from Rocky Horror Shows His Heels, paired up with all new songs. First draft of the script apparently was completed, but nothing ever went further than there.
There has been a remake of sorts. Fox Network announced it did a modern day reimagining of the film titled The Rocky Horror Picture Show, Let's Do the Time Warp Again, back in 2015, which isn't bad. Because, you know, the thing about the Rocky Horror Show, every time you see it, you'll usually see it with a different cast. Transgender actress Laverne Cox played Frankenfurter. Ryan McCartan played Brad alongside Victoria Justice as Janet. It's okay. The good point about it is Tim Curry portrays the criminologist this time, and it's not bad because, as I said, every time I've seen the Rocky Horror Show, I've never seen the same cast twice. But of course, everyone is always going to remember the original and remember that cast in particular. Remember Tim Curry in, not that it's his finest role. I've seen him do so much of the stuff, but his iconic role as Frankenfurter.
His finest clothes.
Yeah, the best wardrobe he's ever worn. And it is just a brilliant film. And if you've not seen it, and I'm kind of doubt, I mean, you guys are all film geeks, you will have seen the Rocky Horror Show. And it is just one thing. It's joy. It's just pure, unadulterated joy.
Yes. With the remake that of recent years, yeah, like you say, it's not bad. It just pales significantly in comparison. I did like what Reeve Carney did with the part of Riff Raff. I thought that he definitely stood out. I just felt that the rest of it was just, it was the same kind of fun that you get if you go to watch a stage production. It's not going to be the same as the film that we love, but you can still enjoy it and still get involved in it and still tap along to those great tunes. We've not mentioned when it came to the cast. I mean, obviously, we've spoken a lot about Tim Curry and we've briefly touched on the cast around him, but Meatloaf, short turn as Eddie,
just before he broke big.
Moments. Yeah, absolute standout moments with one of the best songs in the whole production.
Adam Lambert did it in the TV version, didn't he?
Yeah, which he did an all right job, but
I like Adam Lambert.
Nothing's going to compare to Meatloaf. No one can compare to Meatloaf. It's a film with so many moments, and talking about it now, I want to watch it again now because all my favourite moments are flooding back to me. And I will never tire of watching this, tapping my toes and singing along to pretty much every tune. I've regularly had this on my MP3 player and listened through the whole album on repeat because I just love everything Rocky Horror.
You can watch the Rocky Horror Show, can't you, Andy? Whenever you want, because currently it's on Disney Plus.
Yes, I mean, it seems like a strange place to put it, but as we know, Disney Plus has a lot of adult content these days. But like I said, I was very young when I first watched this, so maybe they should open it up for all the young ones to watch, and maybe everyone should embrace their sexual innermost self, watching the Rocky Horror Show, and don't dream it, be it.